I thought she was just here to clean the house. But the moment I opened that bedroom door, everything I believed about love, loyalty, and trust began to unravel. Keynote 1. The day she arrived. The story opens on a soft autumn morning, the kind of day where the air feels crisp, yet carries the warmth of sunlight slipping through half-drawn curtains. Our narrator, a 26-year-old man, has been living with his girlfriend, Lena, for 2 years in a small but welcoming house just outside the city. Their relationship has grown comfortable, even predictable. Lately, he's sensed a quiet distance in Lena, like she's often preoccupied, her smile shorter, her laughter a little delayed. He hasn't said anything, partly out of respect, partly out of fear of what the answer might be. That morning, Lena introduces Rosa, a 42-year-old housekeeper. Rosa carries herself with calm confidence, her presence gentle but unmistakably poised. Her dark hair is tied into a low bun, and there's a quiet steadiness in her eyes that makes even the messy living room feel a little more dignified. When she greets the narrator, her voice is low, melodic, polite, yet warm in a way that lingers longer than expected. The first few minutes set the emotional tone. Narrator's inner observation. He notices the slight roughness of Rosa's hands when they shake, as if life has made her strong but not unkind. Lena's demeanor. She's unusually cheerful around Rosa, as though relieved to have someone else share the domestic load. Atmospheric detail. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mingles with the faint scent of floor polish that Rosa brings in on her apron, an unexpected blend of homeliness and change. Throughout the day, the narrator remains aware of Rosa's quiet efficiency, the soft thud of cushions being fluffed, the gentle clink of glassware she arranges with care. These sounds become the backdrop of the house, a rhythm that begins to calm him without his realizing it. The keynote aims to plant emotional seeds without rushing the story. Hints of tension. While Lena is at work, Rosa hums old songs as she cleans. The narrator overhears snippets of her humming and finds them strangely comforting. A fleeting moment. When he reaches to move a heavy box she's about to lift, their hands brush briefly. The contact is accidental. Her fingers cool from the water she was using to wipe the counters. The narrator notes the touch, but quickly brushes off the thought. Subtle foreshadowing. Rosa lingers a moment longer than needed by the bedroom doorway, studying an old photo of Lena and her best friend, Maren. Her expression is unreadable, thoughtful, perhaps nostalgic, but she doesn't explain, and he doesn't ask. The narrator's emotional goal in this first part is to establish his role as an observer, someone who notices details others overlook, expressions, small gestures, the spaces between words. His curiosity is genuine but tempered by respect. He's not yet aware that these observations will soon pull him into deeper questions about trust and closeness. By the end of part 1, Rosa has quietly transformed the atmosphere of the house. It feels warmer, more alive, not because of her cleaning alone, but because of the stillness she carries into every room she enters. The narrator finds himself leaning against the kitchen doorway late that evening, watching her rinse out the last cloth under the tap. The golden light from the overhead lamp glints softly off the water on her hands, and in that small, ordinary scene, something about the house, and about him, feels different. The keynote closes on a note of gentle intrigue and emotional shift, leaving the audience wondering about Rosa's story and why her presence feels like more than a simple job. A week after Rosa settles in as the housekeeper, the narrator begins to notice how easily she's woven herself into their routines. The house feels calmer, less cluttered not only in appearance but in atmosphere. Even Lena seems lighter, laughing more often as she and Rosa exchange warm, teasing remarks over breakfast. The narrator's sense of comfort, however, is short-lived. On a gray Thursday afternoon, Lena announces that her best friend, Maren, will be staying with them for a few days. Maren, 41, is someone the narrator has only met briefly at dinner parties. Always radiant, the sort of woman who commands attention without trying. When she arrives, there's a slight drizzle outside, her coat damp at the shoulders, her dark auburn hair curling gently with the moisture. Her smile is immediate, generous, and a little too knowing, as if she already senses things about people before they speak. The initial interaction sets the tone for the simmering tension that will follow. When the narrator helps her carry her luggage upstairs, Maren thanks him with a soft laugh, her hand resting briefly on his arm. A friendly gesture, but warm enough to be felt hours later. Rosa greets Maren with a polite nod that's more restrained than usual. There's a flicker, barely perceptible, in her eyes, a mix of surprise and something unspoken, like two chapters of the same story quietly acknowledging each other. Lena is cheerful but watchful, her gaze darting between the two women as if trying to read something that no one else can see. Throughout that evening, the house fills with subtle but charged moments. At dinner, Maren tells stories about her travels, her voice smooth, drawing out laughter from Lena and a rare smile from Rosa. The narrator notices Rosa lowering her gaze often during Maren's stories, as though they stir memories she's not ready to share. He also notices how the rhythm of the evening feels slightly different, like the balance that Rosa's presence brought to the house is shifting again. Sensory details and atmosphere. The soft glow of the dining room lamp highlights the warmth in Maren's hair. The faint scent of her rain-soaked scarf lingers on the back of a chair long after she's hung it up. The sound of Rosa quietly clearing plates feels almost louder than the conversation, its softness carrying a note of tension the narrator can't quite explain. Later that night, the narrator passes by the guest room and hears Maren and Rosa talking in low voices, the words too quiet to make out. There's a murmur of laughter, then silence. Something about the hush that follows makes him pause in the hallway longer than he should. This keynote's emotional goal is to heighten the audience's sense of curiosity and complexity. There's no open conflict, but unspoken histories seem to ripple beneath the surface. The narrator is still mostly an observer, yet he feels the atmosphere shift, the house subtly charged in a way that wasn't there before Maren arrived. The connection, or tension, between Maren and Rosa begins to form the story's central thread of intrigue. By the end of part 2, the narrator reflects on how quickly the house has changed again. What was once only his and Lena's space now feels like a stage where something unseen is quietly unfolding. The rain taps lightly against the window as he lies awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if it's only his imagination, or if the house itself is holding its breath. The third part opens on a late evening, a few days into Maren's stay. The weather has shifted. An unseasonably cool breeze drifts through the half-open windows, carrying the earthy scent of wet grass. The house feels still but not empty, like a room that's listening. The narrator returns from a long day at work to find Lena gone to dinner with colleagues. The living room is dimly lit by a single lamp. Rosa is in the kitchen drying the last of the dishes. The gentle scrape of ceramic against the towel is the only sound. Maren sits curled up in an armchair near the fireplace, though it's unlit. Absently running her fingers along the edge of a book she hasn't turned a page of in half an hour. The opening moments focus on quiet observation. The narrator notices how the light catches the lines at the corners of Maren's eyes. Not unkind lines, but the kind carved by years of laughter and a few late-night tears. Rosa's hands move with steady purpose, yet there's a heaviness in her posture that wasn't there before. A distant rumble of thunder makes the window panes tremble slightly, and for a heartbeat, all three of them share the same silence. This scene is about intimacy without words. The narrator, sensing the shift in the room's mood, asks Maren if she's enjoying her stay. She smiles faintly, but her response is softer than her usual warmth. "It's peaceful here," she says, then after a pause adds, "Maybe too peaceful sometimes." Rosa glances over from the kitchen, just a quick glance, but the narrator catches it. There's history in that look, a connection the two women seem to acknowledge but don't explain. A subtle physical moment develops when Maren reaches for the book on the coffee table. The narrator leans forward to pass it to her, their fingers brushing lightly. The touch is fleeting, polite, yet it carries a spark of recognition, as if both silently acknowledge they are strangers sharing the same quiet evening. To deepen the intrigue, Rosa eventually joins them, bringing a pot of herbal tea. The aroma of chamomile fills the room. She sets a cup in front of Maren, then one for the narrator, her movements careful but graceful. When she lowers herself into the chair across from them, her eyes briefly meet Maren's, another unspoken exchange. Key emotional beats of this keynote. The narrator senses he's missing pieces of a larger story between the two women. Maren seems torn between wanting to share something and keeping her guard up. Rosa's calm presence feels like both a comfort and a barrier, as if she's protecting a secret. As the evening winds down, a soft rain begins to fall. The three of them sit quietly, listening to the rhythmic patter against the windows. The narrator feels a strange closeness in that silence, as if the rain has drawn an invisible circle around them. Before heading to her room, Maren offers a gentle goodnight and touches the narrator's shoulder lightly in passing. A simple, friendly gesture that leaves a trace of warmth behind. Rosa lingers a moment longer to rinse the teapot, her silhouette framed against the kitchen light, then disappears down the hallway without a word. The scene ends with the narrator alone in the living room, the faint scent of chamomile still in the air, aware that he has stepped deeper into a story he doesn't yet understand. A week passes after the rainy night. The house has fallen into a gentle rhythm again, but beneath the surface, something lingers, like a soft vibration in the air that no one mentions. The opening scene unfolds on a cool Saturday evening. Lena has gone to visit her parents, leaving the narrator alone with Rosa and Maren. The sky outside is painted in pale lavender and muted gold as the sun sinks behind the rooftops, spilling the last traces of light across the wooden floorboards. The narrator notices small changes in the house's atmosphere. Rosa hums less often now while she works, her silence filling the corners of the house where her songs once lived. Maren has started spending long hours on the back porch, sketching in a small, leather-bound notebook. The air between them all feels both softer and heavier, like everyone is waiting for a conversation they haven't found the courage to start. That evening, the narrator steps out onto the porch to refill Maren's tea. She's leaning against the railing, her hair loosely pinned, a few strands slipping free and swaying in the breeze. The scent of rain-soaked earth still lingers in the garden, and fireflies spark faintly in the dimming light. Maren thanks him quietly, her fingers brushing his as she accepts the cup. Her voice is lower than usual, more reflective. She tells him she likes the quiet of the house at this hour. It makes you hear things you usually ignore. A moment of emotional honesty follows. She admits that she came to stay not just to visit Lena, but because she needed distance from her own life for a while. Her tone carries a mixture of regret and tenderness that hints at unspoken struggles. The narrator listens without pressing for details, sensing her need for someone to simply hear her rather than fix her problems. Later, as Maren heads inside, the narrator remains on the porch, watching the light spill from the kitchen window where Rosa is tidying up. The warmth of the lamp makes her silhouette seem almost like a painting, familiar yet distant. When he steps back inside, the hallway is dim except for a soft glow seeping from Rosa's room. The door is slightly ajar. As he walks past, he hears the rustle of pages and the faint clink of porcelain. Rosa's voice reaches him, soft, almost like a whisper, though she isn't speaking to anyone. Curious but hesitant, he pauses, then lightly taps on the doorframe. Inside, Rosa is seated at a small desk, writing in a worn notebook. She looks up, surprised but not startled. The conversation that follows is brief but telling. She admits she often writes late at night because the quiet hours feel more honest. The narrator notices a vulnerability in her eyes he hasn't seen before, something fragile beneath her composed exterior. A moment of gentle connection closes the scene. As he turns to leave, Rosa thanks him for not prying earlier when she seemed distant. She doesn't explain what's on her mind, but her gratitude feels sincere. For the first time, the narrator realizes how much both women are carrying beneath their calm exteriors. Key emotional beats of this keynote. Maren's confession reveals that her visit is rooted in personal turmoil, adding depth to her presence. Rosa's late-night writing hints at her private struggles and a more poetic side to her character. The narrator begins to see the two women not as mysterious figures, but as people with quiet wounds. The scene ends with the narrator walking back to his room, the low hum of the house settling into a peaceful silence. He feels both closer to them and more aware of how much he doesn't yet know, like standing at the edge of a story that's just beginning to open. A few more days pass, and the weather outside grows restless, sun-streaked mornings giving way to cloudy afternoons and sudden, misty rain. The shifts in the sky seem to echo the shifting moods in the house. The story opens on a late afternoon when the narrator returns early from work. The front door creaks as he steps in, shaking off droplets from a light drizzle. The house is unusually quiet. The usual soft rhythm of Rosa's humming or the sound of dishes clinking isn't there. Following the faint smell of brewed ginger tea, he finds Rosa in the sunroom, sitting by the window with her hands cupped around a steaming mug. The glass panes are misted by the rain outside, turning the garden into a blurred watercolor. She looks up as he approaches, offering a small smile, polite, but not quite reaching her eyes. The narrator sits down across from her, noticing how the pale afternoon light softens her features. He doesn't ask what's on her mind right away. Instead, he comments on the rain, the garden, the tea, small words that fill the space without demanding too much. Rosa eventually speaks in a quiet voice. Sometimes a house starts to feel smaller the longer you stay in it. She doesn't elaborate, and he senses it's more than just the walls closing in. Her fingers tighten slightly around the mug before she lets out a breath, the kind of sigh that seems to release more than air. Before he can respond, they hear Maren's footsteps on the stairs. She appears carrying a sketchpad tucked under one arm, her hair loosely tied back, cheeks flushed as if she's just come in from the cool air outside. There's a softness in her smile when she sees them together, but also a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Maren joins them, setting her sketchpad on the table. As she flips it open, the narrator glimpses delicate pencil drawings of the garden, the tangled vines, the worn porch steps, even the outline of the sunroom window. One page shows a quiet scene of Rosa leaning over a basket of laundry, captured from memory, not posed. The room grows warmer with their presence, yet beneath the surface, there's an almost tangible tension, unspoken feelings pressing against polite words. Key emotional interactions. When Maren brushes a stray lock of hair behind her ear, her elbow grazes the narrator's arm. The accidental touch is small but charged with awareness. Rosa reaches to adjust the teapot, and her fingers brush the back of Maren's hand briefly. Both women share a quick glance and a faint, knowing smile. Gentle, not suggestive, but layered with history. The narrator, sitting between them, senses the weight of what's left unsaid, like pages in a book waiting to be turned. As evening falls, the three share tea while the rain continues to patter softly outside. The narrator feels the house tightening around them in a strangely comforting way, an intimacy born not from closeness of bodies, but from shared quiet and the trust of unspoken understanding. By the end of this part, Lena returns late from an errand, her entrance breaking the delicate stillness. The narrator notices how both Rosa and Maren's expressions shift instantly. Warmer smiles, steadier tones, like they've put their thoughts back behind a curtain. Key emotional beats of this keynote. The rain and changing weather mirror the inner restlessness of the characters. Rosa shows the first sign of emotional fatigue, revealing her vulnerability. Maren's sketches become a subtle window into how she sees the house and the people in it. The closeness among the three grows more palpable, yet remains restrained, sustaining the slow burn tension. The part closes with the narrator lying awake that night, replaying the look in Rosa's eyes by the window and the way Maren's sketch of her carried an unspoken tenderness. He realizes that the story unfolding in their home is far more fragile and profound than he first thought. The sixth chapter opens with a restless sky. A low, steady rain has been falling since dawn, washing the garden paths into soft rivulets and casting the whole house in a silver-gray light. The windows are streaked with droplets, and the air inside feels dense, as if the walls themselves are listening. The narrator wakes early, unable to shake the weight of a dream he can't quite recall. Downstairs, he hears Rosa moving about in the kitchen, her steps softer than usual, her motions careful, almost cautious. The scent of cinnamon and wet earth drifts through the hallway, a mix of her morning tea and a rain-soaked garden. As he enters the kitchen, Rosa is wiping down the counter in slow, even strokes. She looks up and greets him with a gentle smile, but her eyes carry the kind of tiredness that lingers even after a good night's sleep. The narrator pours himself a cup of coffee and sits across from her. Neither speaks for a while. The silence feels companionable, yet tinged with the sense that words are building just behind it. Maren appears soon after, wrapped in a long cardigan, her hair a little damp from the rain that seeped in through the porch. She joins them, pulling the cardigan tighter as if to guard herself against more than the chill. Her sketchpad rests on the table beside her cup, The conversation that follows begins lightly. Weather, the garden, Lena's late nights at work, but gradually shifts as Maren mentions, almost offhandedly, that she might leave earlier than planned. Her tone is casual, but the narrator notices Rosa's hand pause mid-wipe on the counter. It's a brief hesitation, but it says more than words. The narrator senses something unsaid between the two women. Maren avoids Rosa's gaze, focusing instead on her tea. Rosa, usually composed, fidgets with the edge of her towel. The air feels thick, charged with a mix of affection, regret, and restraint. Key physical and emotional moments. When Maren accidentally knocks her spoon off the table, the narrator bends to pick it up at the same time she does. Their foreheads nearly bump, and they both laugh quietly, an ordinary accident that feels unexpectedly intimate. Rosa sets a fresh cup in front of Maren. Their fingers brush briefly, and the narrator catches a flicker of softness pass across Rosa's face, an echo of something long held between them. Outside, the rain taps against the windows with steady persistence, as if mirroring the words the three of them keep locked inside. Later that afternoon, the narrator finds himself on the porch watching the rain pool on the wooden steps. Rosa joins him, leaning against the railing, her arms folded across her chest. After a long silence, she admits that sometimes the hardest part of working in someone else's home is not the labor, but watching people you care about drift further away from each other. The confession surprises him. Her voice is quiet, almost lost in the rain, but it feels like a doorway opening just a crack. He doesn't press her to explain who she's referring to, Lena, Maren, or perhaps herself. Instead, he simply stands beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touch, sharing the moment without intruding. As evening falls, the rain shows no sign of stopping. Lena returns late again, cheerful but distant, filling the house with the scent of her perfume as she breezes past the quiet trio at the table. The narrator feels a subtle ache at how easily her presence changes the room's balance, as though the tender, unspoken understanding he shares with Rosa and Maren gets tucked away the instant Lena arrives. Key emotional beats of this keynote. The endless rain mirrors the unspoken tension and longing between the characters. Maren's mention of leaving early stirs old emotions in Rosa, hinting at shared history. Rosa's candid remark about watching people drift apart reveals her depth and empathy. The narrator becomes increasingly aware of how these quiet exchanges are shaping the house's atmosphere. The chapter ends with the narrator lying awake that night, listening to the rain against the roof and wondering if the storm outside will pass before the one inside their hearts finds a way to be spoken. The rain finally stopped after 2 days, leaving the garden washed clean and glistening under a pale spring sun. The house smelled faintly of damp soil and freshly opened windows. The air felt lighter, though a quiet tension still lingered, like the hush that follows a storm. The last chapter begins on a Sunday afternoon. Lena decides to visit her sister for the evening, leaving the narrator at home with Rosa and Maren. The narrator senses that the house itself is urging them toward the conversation they've all been avoiding. He finds Rosa in the kitchen, kneading dough for bread, her sleeves rolled up and her hair pinned neatly. The sight feels oddly grounding, her hands moving rhythmically as if steadying her thoughts. Maren appears a few minutes later carrying a vase of fresh garden flowers, anemones, their pale petals still jeweled with dew. She sets them in the center of the table with a quiet sigh. The mood of the scene is warm but restrained. Sunlight filters through the lace curtains, casting patterned shadows across the floor. The rhythmic sound of Rosa's kneading mixes with the faint breeze through the window. The narrator senses it's the right time to address the silence that has been binding them all. He breaks it gently. It feels like we've all been carrying too much alone. The words linger in the room before Maren responds. She admits that she'd come to stay not merely for rest, but to step away from a life that had grown heavy, an unfulfilled relationship, a job that left her feeling unseen. She confesses she found a strange peace in Rosa's quiet steadiness and the house's calm corners. Rosa listens without interruption, her hands stilling for a moment over the dough. Then, in a voice soft but firm, she reveals that she once knew Maren years ago, before she became a housekeeper, when both were younger and more hopeful. They had been close friends who lost touch after life took them in different directions. Maren's arrival had stirred old emotions, memories of shared laughter and the roads not taken. The narrator realizes then that the glances, the quiet exchanges, the lingering warmth between the two women were not secrets of betrayal, but fragments of a friendship neither had expected to revisit. Sensory and emotional details. Rosa wipes her flour-dusted hands on her apron before reaching across the table to squeeze Maren's fingers gently, a gesture of reconciliation rather than romance. The afternoon sunlight shifts, warming the table where their joined hands rest, highlighting the small but powerful moment of connection. The narrator feels a release in the air around them, as though the walls of the house themselves have exhaled. Later, as they share the freshly baked bread and tea, the conversation softens. They talk about the garden, their plans for the coming weeks, even laugh about small domestic mishaps. The tension that had filled the house for days seems to dissolve into something quieter and more comforting, an acceptance of their shared humanity. Key emotional beats of this keynote. The central misunderstandings are resolved. There was no betrayal, only untold histories. Rosa and Maren rekindle a friendship that had once been dear to both of them. The narrator understands that the connection he felt with both women was rooted in empathy and shared solitude, not forbidden attraction. The three find a new sense of trust and ease under the same roof. The story closes at dusk. The three of them sit on the porch steps, the garden faintly glowing under the early stars. The narrator describes how Maren leans her head lightly against Rosa's shoulder as they watch the sky darken, while he sits nearby, content in their quiet companionship. The final lines reflect a sense of healing and acceptance. I thought the house felt crowded when they both arrived. I didn't realize it was loneliness that had made the walls feel so close. That night, under the open sky, the house finally felt like a home. Revolving hearts, if this slow burn story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves heartfelt age gap romances. Memo comment below, which moment in the story felt the most real to you? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next story. More warm, emotional tales are on the way.